to, I don't know if other panelists want to do the same. I'm just going to turn my video off while I do this because I find it really distracting seeing my face when I'm trying to speak. So I'm just going to turn my video off, but I will turn it on at the end. So welcome everyone. This class is called How to Get the Retirement That You Want. As I mentioned just now, we have prepared a worksheet for you. You're very welcome to print that out or to get it online now and fill it in. You can fill it in afterwards or while we go along. The point of this worksheet is to help you take action on the information we're going to share with you. It's really important that you do something. You'll find out why when we watch a class. And as I said, do put questions into chat or Q&A while we're going through. We'll try and answer them as we go along, but we'll definitely answer them at the end for you. So thank you so much for joining us here. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Hannah Martin. I'm the founder of Talented Ladies Club. We've been going since 2013. I'm an award-winning advertising copywriter and qualified psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and NLP practitioner. And I'm really passionate about empowering women to take control of their lives through finding the careers they want, the business and freelance work they want, but also our finances. And all too often, women lag behind men, and I want to help educate you and help you take action. We're also joined today by Becky O'Connor. Now, she's Director of Public Affairs for PensionBee. She's a personal finance and investment expert and award-winning journalist with over 2 decades of experience in journalism and communications. So she's the Telegraph's pension doctor and a columnist for the iPaper. And she's also the main spokesperson for consumer pension stories for PensionBee and regularly appears on TV and radio and print. Also joined by Emma Maslin. So she's the founder of The Money Whisperer. Now she's a certified money coach, personal finance speaker, and founder of multi-award-winning personal finance education website, The Money Whisperer. She writes for the Financial Times and more. She's also written for Huffington Post, This Is Money, and Metro, and she's been featured in The Guardian, The Times, The Independent, Stylist, and Red. And I'm just going to hand over to Emma now to just explain why this webinar is so important.
Well, thank you very much, Hannah, for the intro, and welcome to everybody, and thanks for joining us today on this session. But firstly, before I even kick off on this slide, I want to say that you will notice that we are 3 women in our prime. You are not sitting listening to old grey men in pinstripe suits, and I think that's really important just to put out there to say that, you know, this is very much an educational session today. I'm a bit croaky, I have to say. I've got a bit of a croaky throat, so you'll have to apologise for my croaky voice. But, you know, we are here because I'm really passionate that we need to get people excited about the potential for pensions. And if you, Becky, Hannah, if you just flick back to the last slide. Yeah, and we really want from you for this session to have some action steps really to leave with, to get you empowered towards saving for that retirement that you want. You know, I'm really passionate that when we can learn about what to do effectively with our money, it gives us freedom. And being able to use your money to buy you time to do all those things that you want to do in retirement is one of the easiest ways that we can kind of connect with how exciting it is to do good stuff with our money. So next slide, please, Hannah. First up, before we start anything in today's session, because we're going to be talking about pensions and they are a financial product, we do need a little caveat that says nothing that we're talking about today should be regarded as financial advice. And when you do invest your money, your capital is at risk. So the money invested could go down in value as well as up. So we are here to educate and we're here to encourage you into action. So let's have a little look now about why this session is so important. So 33% of women over the age of 50, according to the Sun Life Well Spent study, are relying solely on the state pension for their retirement. Now, again, no judgment zone here. You know, we were not taught about personal finance at school, by and large, most of us. And we kind of just assume that because we receive the state pension, you know, that's going to get us by in later life. But that amount is not going to be enough. and we're going to talk about why and the mechanics of it later. But if we look at this slide now, how do we know then how much is enough? And the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association is an organisation that's done a lot of research into this to really give people some really tangible research to be able to help people get that concept. You know, how much is it that I do need to retire in a way that is my vision of retirement? You know, and 77% of people don't know how much they think they are going to need when they retire. And 70% said that those targets would help them save more. So that's what the information that we're really going to impress on you today to help give you that target. And then from a target, you can obviously then reverse engineer how to get to that point. Okay, so what we're going to look at today, we're going to have a look. Hannah's going to kick off looking at the kind of retirement that you want and how much that might cost you, depending on whether you're single or in a couple. Then we're going to have a look at the state pension, and we're going to have a look at what gap there might be between the state pension that you can receive and however much your ideal retirement is going to cost you, and then how you can fill that gap, or how you can get, you know, how we can get started if you haven't really started yet. So I'm going to hand back to Hannah now to talk about the type of retirement that you might like to visualize.
Thanks, Emma. So this is one thing that actually most of us don't do. We don't think about what kind of retirement we want. We just try and think about how much money we've got to save. So I'm going to start with a quick poll. So bear with me here. I've never done one of these before. Just polls and quizzes. So hopefully you can see on your screen here. So I'd be interested to find out how many of you have thought about what kind of retirement you want and how much it might cost, just to get a quick kind of poll. That's interesting. It's changing quite. So it's not that different. So just slightly more. So we've got about 58% have and 43% haven't. So it's a rough kind of even split, which is good because it means actually quite a lot of you have already been thinking about this, which surprises me in a really good way. So the reality is, before you can plan how much you need to save for something, including retirement, you need to have an idea of how much that will cost. Just to give you two examples. So you might want to spend your retirement jetting around the world on 5-star holidays and dining in expensive restaurants. Or you might fancy just pottering on your garden at home, and you might want like the simple life. So as you can imagine, those two different retirements require vastly different budgets. You know, if you are aspiring to have 5-star holidays, you need the money to pay for that. But equally, if you just you've paid off your house, you just want to grow your own vegetables, or you want the simple life, that requires a lot less money. So it's really important to consider what you want to be doing when you finish work and how many years as well. I mean, some people might think, well, if I retire in mid-60s, I might want to spend 10 years traveling. And then after that, actually, I'm probably not going to want to do that much. So but really think about how you want to spend your retirement and then what kind of budget that lifestyle would require. And there is some research. So Emma mentioned the retirement living standards earlier. So they've done some research that shows you how much on average you'll need. So if you're a single person and you want a minimum lifestyle, and I'll explain in a minute what these all mean, these terms, but if you want a minimum lifestyle, you need around £14,400 a year. If you want a moderate lifestyle, they estimate you'll need £31,300 a year. And for a comfortable lifestyle, it's just over £43,000 a year. And if you're in a couple, that rises to, collectively, the two of you will need £22,400 a year for a minimum lifestyle, £43,100 a year for a moderate lifestyle, and £59,000 a year for a comfortable lifestyle. So what do these lifestyles mean, and how do they quantify things like moderate? So a minimum lifestyle, now they estimate that this covers all of your basic needs and leaves you some left over for fun, like the odd meal out. And just to let you know that they assume in this that you don't have any rent or mortgage. So you're living in a property that you've bought when they estimate all of these figures. A minimum lifestyle does not cover the cost of running a car. It does include a long weekend away in the UK every year. It gives you £54 a week for food and up to £580 a year for clothing and footwear. So that's a rough idea that if a minimum lifestyle, that's the kind of thing it will buy you. A moderate lifestyle allows for a little more financial security and flexibility. So, for example, you can have 2 weeks holiday a year in Europe. It buys you a 3-year-old car changed every 10 years. It gives you £74 a week for food and up to £791 a year for clothing and footwear. And a comfortable lifestyle gives you more freedom and some luxury. So, for example, they factor in perhaps a 3-week holiday in Europe a year, a new kitchen and bathroom every 10 to 15 years, a 2-year-old car changed every 5 years, £144 a week for food. And by the way, when they talk about food here, that includes eating out as well as eating in, and up to £1,500 a year for clothing and footwear. Now, obviously, you might not want a new car, perhaps, or you might want to eat out more. So you might want to spend as much as on clothes and shoes. These don't necessarily all kind of a tick box you have to attain. But I think what it helps you to do is to think about what kind of things your money might buy and start to be realistic about how much you're going to be saving and what that's going to buy you. It's also worth considering when you want to retire. So the later you leave retirement, the more time you have to save, the more time that compound interest can build up, and the more you'll have to spend when you do retire. So if funds are tight, delaying retirement could be a strategy that you consider. So there's also something called the government's target replacement rates. So when you think about how much you want when you retire, another way of looking at it is a percentage of your current salary. So for example, if you currently earn under £14,500 a year, the government estimates that you will need 80% of that when you retire. If you earn between 14,500 and 26,999, you need 70%, and then it goes up to 67, 60. And if you earn over 61,000 currently, they estimate you'll need about 50% of that when you retire. So it's another way of thinking about how much you have now and how much of that you might need when you retire. So I hope that gives you a quick run through of the kind of lifestyle that you might want when you retire, so thinking about that, and then using numbers that we know, estimates of how much you might need to give you an idea of actually how much you might need a year when you retire. So I'm just going to hand back to Emma now to look at how you can find that money when you retire.
This is Becky, actually.
Thank you. I was just busy, lost in the web chat then. So when you have an idea of how much money you'll need when you retire, you can then formulate a plan of attack or action to achieve it. So this will include details of how much you're entitled to from the state pension, and as well as other income sources, because we have more than just pensions at our disposal. There may be income from ISAs or property, for instance, that you want to take into account in addition to pensions. And then even within pensions, there are different kinds of pensions that you may have accumulated along the way. So you may have money in former workplace pensions, but you might also have some in personal pensions that you have saved into for yourself without an employer setting up for you from the years that you have spent in work. So holistically, it's important to look at every part of your assets, not just the pension when you're planning. So if you qualify for the full new state pension, the amount that you would get at the moment would be just over £11,500 a year from this April. So in a few weeks that goes up. You need 35 years of qualifying years of national insurance contributions to get that full amount. But if you have worked for less than that, you may have national insurance credits that will get you to that full entitlement if you weren't working, but if you were caring, for instance, caring for children at some point during your career. So once you've got the state pension, that is actually the bedrock of most people's retirement income. And by that I mean it's the source that will generate the most retirement income for most people. So then what you need is to fill the gap between the amount that you're looking to for your ideal lifestyle annually, once you've decided what that is, and the amount that you're getting from your state pension. So if you're not getting the full amount from your state pension, clearly you would need a bit more from your private pension savings to be able to afford the lifestyle that you are aiming for. So if you're single, the gap between the amount of full state pension that you get and the minimum lifestyle amount that is required is £2,900 a year. For the moderate lifestyle that Hannah described, that the gap would be 19,800 a year. And for the comfortable lifestyle, the gap would be 31,600 a year. As a couple, you do benefit from some economies of scale if you're in a couple, which means that the gap is lower in each case for the amounts that you need. So if you're in a couple and you both receive the full state pension, you actually don't need any additional private pension savings. You would have a slight excess of £600 a year. But if you were aiming for a moderate lifestyle in a couple, you would need £20,100 a year extra on top of the state pension. That's the state pension from two people, and the 20,100 would be from joint savings, and £36,000 a year would be the extra amount you'd need for a comfortable lifestyle. So you can see that the extra amounts are, you know, quite considerable as you move up through those different lifestyle standards. So it is quite important to work out, you know, what you want to aim for. So how do we fill in the gap between the two? So one way of doing this is if you're still working when you reach the age that you're entitled to your state pension, or even if you're not still working, but you're able to live off income from other sources, you know, perhaps inheritance, perhaps other assets, then you can consider deferring your state pension. And this can be a really valuable way of increasing your income for when you do actually want to start taking state pension. So for every 9 weeks that you defer taking it, you get an additional 1%. And for every year that you defer taking it, you get an additional 5.8% on top of what you would have had. So it can really add up. And if you defer for a year, you would get just over £670 a year more, which when you take it over the course of a retirement that lasts 20 or 30 years, you can see that is a significant extra boost to your income. I've been talking about this a lot today on the radio because we have just launched some new research which shows that 1 in 10 workers actually think they've lost a pot worth more than £10,000 or more from previous employment from way back when, and that adds up to about 50 billion between us that is sitting in pensions that are at risk of being lost. So it may well be worth your while to check that you don't already have a pension pot that you've forgotten. You usually need the details of old employers or the old pension provider that you think you have the lost pot with. You can contact them directly once you've identified where that pension is, and they can help you with the policy numbers if you don't have the paperwork anymore. And honestly, so many of us do lose the paperwork with people moving from job to job, and many of these pensions having been accumulated decades ago. So it's really worthwhile if if you think you've got an old pension that you have lost touch with, to try and find it, because that can really boost your retirement income. You can then, once you've found it, combine any existing pots into one to make it easier. And we've got the QR code here for PensionBee. With PensionBee, once you have given us the details of the old schemes, we can do all the legwork thereafter and bring those pensions over. Not all pensions can be combined or consolidated. Old defined benefit ones tend to be best if you leave them where they are because of various guarantees. But old defined contribution ones, you could move into one place. Just feels very organized, and can make it easier actually to access the money later on. So when it comes to other sources of income, if you have ISAs, you may have used up your £20,000 ISA allowance every year. If you did, pat on the back, that's really good. Even if you haven't, but you've got some money in ISAs, then you can use ISAs for retirement income in addition to a pension, stocks and shares ISAs or cash ISAs. ISAs, by the way, are slightly different to pensions in the way they're taxed. So with ISAs, the money you take out is tax-free. So any income from an ISA is tax-free, whereas money that you take out of a pension after the 25% tax-free lump sum amount is taxable. If you have a rental property or other investments that earn £12,000 a year after expenses and tax, you can deduct that from the amount that you have calculated you need for your living standard in retirement. Getting that number down slightly here. So once you've taken into account all of these different sources of income, how much you think you need based on whether you're single or in a couple, for the different living standards, and any other costs that aren't included in those living standards, because once you look at them, you might think, oh, actually, that's not quite right for me. But once you've done that, you can work out the kind of retirement you want, how much it's going to cost, how much state pension you're going to get, the gap you need to fill, and any other existing income, and how that's going to affect how much you need to save.
Okay, back to me. So we're going to have a look next at private pensions, and depending on your employment status, there are different intricacies. So depending on whether you're employed, whether you are a sole trader, whether you're self-employed and running a limited company, or whether you're staying at home. It says staying at home with kids, but I would broaden that to say not working at the moment. Okay, so if we have a look firstly at workplace pensions. So auto-enrollment was brought in over 10 years ago now, 2012, to really encourage more people to save into pensions. And it's done a great job, because a lot of people who weren't previously kind of engaged are now saving materially each month towards their retirement. So the good news, if you are employed, even part-time, is that by law, your employer may need to offer you a workplace pension scheme and contribute to it as well. So if you are at least 22 years old, if you haven't yet reached state pension age, if you're earning more than £10,000 a year and you aren't already a member of a suitable workplace scheme, you are eligible to join your workplace pension scheme and contribute towards it. Now, I will just say on this, it's not on the slide, but what that means when we're talking about contributing to it, there are minimum amounts of contributions. So you yourself would make a personal contribution of 4% of your qualifying earnings, and you will receive what we call tax relief on top of that. I'm going to talk about that in the next couple of slides. And then your employer will also contribute on your behalf. So you make a 4% contribution, you get 1% in tax relief, and you get 3% from your employer. So the tax relief and the employer contributions do not cost you anything. They're kind of like a free pay rise, if you want to kind of flip the mindset around what they are. It's free money. So for your 4% contribution, you're actually getting 8% into your pension pot, which is, you know, there's nowhere on the high street that you can go and put your money into a bank and get that kind of immediate return. Okay, so if you earn less than the threshold for auto-enrollment, but you do earn above £6,240, you aren't automatically enrolled. However, if you want to join, your employer can't refuse you and they must make contributions. So that's something just to be aware of if you're maybe working part-time, as can happen. you might not quite reach that threshold, but now that you're aware of this, the benefit of being auto-enrolled is that extra free money, the free money in the form of tax relief and the free money in the form of employer contributions. Now, moving on to talking about private pensions for the self-employed. So good news is that there are also tax benefits. So I've briefly mentioned tax relief. I'm going to explain in a bit more detail what that means. So if you are self-employed and you are a basic rate taxpayer, you will get effectively a 25% tax top-up on any contributions that you make into your pension. So if you were to put £100 into your personal pension, the government would also contribute another £25. So the total amount going into your pension, total contributions would be £125. Now, if you are a higher rate taxpayer or an additional rate taxpayer, this is even better. So if you're a higher rate taxpayer on a 40% tax rate, you can put in £60 into a pension as your contribution and get an extra 40 in free money from the government, so that you have £100 in your pension pot. So I can't understate the value of tax relief. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, and what makes pensions such an exciting product to get excited about. Okay, so on to limited companies. So if you're running your own business through a limited company, as I do, so I can share a bit of a personal story here. I didn't contribute to my pension for a big chunk of time while my children were little. I had an extended maternity leave. Then I went back to work part-time. And during this period, when I went on maternity leave, my husband and my pension pots were pretty similar in terms of size. And actually, as I went through all of these kind of milestones of being a mum and taking time out of work, going back part-time, going back into a different role, all of those penalties, if you like, hit me and impacted my pension. Now my pension is substantially lower than his. So in order to counter that, as I'm now running my own business, I choose to take a large percentage of my earnings as pay, if you like, into my pension. So I'm not getting paid for me right now, but I'm choosing to pay my future self via pension contributions. So it can be a really great thing to do if you've got the ability and the cash flow to be able to do that, because it reduces your tax bill. So pension contributions made by your limited company are treated as an allowable business expense and offset your corporation tax bill. So I'm just having a conversation with my accountant at the moment, and my first question to her was, how much more do I need to put into my pension this year so I don't have to pay any corporation tax? So if you are a business owner out there, this is a really, really great tax perk that still exists. And you know, running a limited company now isn't as great as it used to be, but this is something that can make a huge difference. So really something to think about if you aren't yet contributing via your limited company into your pension scheme. And then the final category. So what happens if you're not working or maybe not earning enough to save into your pension? Now, you do have various rights depending on your relationship situation. So if you're not married and you split up, you don't have any legal right to your partner's pension that they've contributed to while you've been together. If your partner were to pass away and they had nominated you as their beneficiary, so this is a really important point around making sure that any pensions you have, that you've got your paperwork up to date. So you'll be able to nominate a beneficiary, which is the person that benefits from your pension in the event of you passing away. So if your partner were to pass away and you weren't a nominated beneficiary, you don't then have any automatic right to benefit from their private pension. So a really interesting conversation to have, you know, with your partner. Nobody likes these kind of morbid conversations, but it's really important if you've been together a long time and maybe you're not married. making sure that you're nominated as their beneficiary is super important to protect you in the event of them passing away. And if you are married and you unfortunately go through a divorce, a lot of women especially are very focused on, especially if they've got children, very focused on making sure that they have a home and a roof over the head of themselves and their children. And they sometimes neglect looking into what should happen with pensions. And pensions can amount to be a huge asset in the kind of family asset pool. So we often think of the family home as being the main asset, but pensions can overshadow homes in some cases, and if they don't overshadow it, they can be substantial asset pots. So if you divorce, it really is worthwhile speaking to a pension specialist who can help you access some of your spouse's pension via a pension sharing order. So make sure you're legally protected in the event that your partner or your spouse were to pass away or you were to split up. It's also, and this is something that I really talk to a lot of my clients with in a coaching space, you know, as women, we are the nurturers. We're the ones that statistics show tend to take time out of the workforce to care for children while they're young. And that does have an impact on our pension contributions. However, if you're raising a family in partnership with somebody else, have that conversation about what the family funds look like and whether or not there is excess to be able to contribute to a private pension for you during that period that you're not working. And anybody who isn't working is still able to contribute up to £3,600 per year into a private pension. So just think of what that little, it's a relatively small amount, but it's a great way to kind of keep that momentum going to aid that bigger pot that we know we need in retirement. So just as a recap, if you're employed, your employer will also be contributing to your workplace pension under auto-enrolment legislation. And there's my flashlight going again. This is free money. That doesn't cost you anything. It's extra money for you. If you're self-employed and a basic rate taxpayer, you will get a tax top-up worth 25% extra on top of whatever you contribute. And if you are higher or additional rate taxpayers, that increases. And I should just say there's a little star. If you are a higher or additional rate taxpayer, many times you may need to claim further tax relief through your self-assessment tax return. So something just to be aware of. Everybody gets the 25% extra. If you are a higher or additional rate taxpayer, you just need to do a little bit more admin through your tax return. If you run a limited company, pensions are a great way to reduce your corporation tax bill. And if you are not working at the moment, do check your legal rights to your spouse's pension or partners.
Okay, how much do you need to save for your retirement? So all those figures we were looking at before, the annual income amounts that people need, but what do you need to save in order to generate that annual income? So for a moderate lifestyle, if you're single and you're entitled to the full new state pension, you'd need an extra income of £19,800 a year. If you're in a couple and you're both entitled to the full state pension, you would need a joint extra income of £21,550 a year. So that's a recap on what you'd need for the moderate living standard. So there is a handy calculator on the PensionBee website that I use a lot for working out these things. What is the pot size that would give us an income of £20,000 a year? If you want to have a look at the PensionBee calculator for yourself, you can have a quick flick on the QR code and have a look, and you can put in some of your own assumptions, because here we're just using the general figures. So these examples assume your employer contributes £100 a month and that you'll retire at 70. So again, if you want to change any of the assumptions using the calculator to be more specific to your circumstances, you can. But to achieve that moderate living standard, that amount that you need, if you're 20, you'd need to save an extra £210 a month. 30-year-old would need to save an extra £320 a month. If you're 40, it would be £520 a month. And if you're 50, it would be £910 a month. Now, I do think, as you start to look at the numbers, so as you get older, they do seem a little scary. So at this point, I would say, anything is better than nothing. And don't worry at all if those amounts seem unachievable for you. So we're going to have a look at an example of how you can start saving, even if you're starting late. I do like this example.
Thanks, Becky. So pensions are a no-brainer. So let's have a look at this example that we've got. So we've got Jo, who's 55, and she plans to retire in 10 years when she's 65. But she doesn't yet have a private pension. She's self-employed and she earns £30,000 a year. So Jo decides to start a pension and pay in 7% of her gross income. So that's £175 per month. Now, if she does that for 10 years consistently and averages growth of 4%, she's going to have over £32,000 when she retires based on her contributions. Okay. Now, she will also benefit from tax relief, that additional 25% free money from the government that we talked about. So she's also benefiting from what we call compound growth. So compound interest acts a bit like a snowball. So as our money grows, we start off with the initial money that we put in, then we have extra money in terms of the growth. And each year, it's not just the initial money that grows, it's the initial money plus last year's growth that gives us our starting point. So that snowball effect goes on and on and on. And really, time is such a major contributor to how pensions, even when they're started with a relatively small amount, can grow into something quite meaningful. So with this example, leaving it for 10 years, at a relatively moderate growth of 4%, with the benefit of time, with the benefit of compound growth and the benefit of tax relief, Jo's going to see quite a nice pension pot grow for her off the back of her £175,000 a month. So if she opts for a drawdown scheme, which is where she can draw down some of her pension pot that she's got at retirement age, but leave the rest of it invested to continue to grow, she can take around £2,100 a year from her pension pot, and that would last her until she's 88. Now, this is why pensions can be a no-brainer. When she retires, she will have that £32,000, but she's actually only paid in £21,000. As I say, she's benefited from these other pieces of magic that are really helping our pensions work harder for us. So in order to achieve the same kind of performance with a regular investment fund, she would have needed to generate a return of 8% consistently. And the important thing to mention here with drawdown, while she is retired, the money that she leaves in her pension can continue to grow, which is a really great thing. So in total, she might be able to draw down just shy of £50,000 when she retires over the course of her retirement, all from that initial £21,000 investment. So, we're seeing the benefit of the power of compound interest and allowing that money to do its thing and grow over time. We're seeing the benefit of receiving that tax relief, that powerful kind of kicker from the government to jumpstart whatever money we contribute. And that's just from 10 years of saving. So whilst there might be some of you listening today who think, gosh, I've left it too late to start, you've never left it too late. The best time to start is when you're young, but the second best time to start is absolutely right now. So if you are 55 like Jo or more, please don't think you've left it too late. And if you're younger, or you plan to retire a bit later, or you can contribute more, you're just going to have more to live on, which is a really great thing. As we've seen from today's session, depending on what you're aiming for, you may need to aim for more anyway. So pensions aren't just another way of investing money. You know, we can put our money into a savings account, we can benefit from interest, we can put our money into an ISA, which Becky talked about earlier, and the money in there would grow free of interest and capital gains tax. But with pensions, the really powerful part of them is tax relief, and especially if you're auto-enrolled via a workplace pension scheme, getting free money in the form of employer contributions as well. There's so much free money that comes with pensions. So while it's wise to start a pension as early as you can, even if you've left it too late, or you've not, sorry, it's never too late. If you've left it late, you can still benefit significantly from having a pension. And if you haven't left it late and you're in that fortunate position of being able to start saving now, we hope that off the back of today's session, you'll really be able to enjoy that retirement that you're looking forward to.
So thank you, Emma and Becky. So what should you do now? Hopefully you're feeling excited and inspired and empowered after this class. So there's a QR code you can scan here. That will take you to the PensionBee website, where you can see if you've got another pension pot that you have forgotten about and find out more information about pensions. And don't forget to use the worksheet that we sent you. This will help you use some of the information we shared in this class so you can get a picture of where you are now and create an action plan. And what I'm going to do as well, because I know there's a lot of information we've shared that you might not have written down all the numbers. So on our learning platform where you download the worksheet, we're going to put a recording of the class afterwards. And I'll also turn the notes from this class into an ebook. I'll save it as a PDF. So it's got all the numbers on there. So even if you haven't got your worksheet now, you can print it off or open it as it's an editable PDF. So you can open it on your screen and just go through it and start filling in. But really cannot emphasize enough. And just as Emma was mentioning just now, you know, the second best time, obviously me included, I wish I'd started a pension in my 20s. I left it till I was in my late 40s. But it's never too late. If you start saving now, your future self really will thank you for it. And thank you everyone for spending your time with us today. I hope that you have felt rewarded by lots of really helpful information. If you do have a question, we're going to go to questions now. I'm just going to turn my camera back on again. So yeah, we've got 15 minutes of Becky left, and we've got Emma as well. So do feel free to put into chat or Q&A if you have any questions. But I would love to know if you can put in chat if you found that helpful. What was the most surprising thing that you learned? And do you feel more hopeful now than you did perhaps at the start before watching this? Okay, so someone just mentioned about the worksheet. So the worksheet, I sent an email out earlier. Don't worry if you haven't got it, because I'll send another one out afterwards. You just need to sign on to our learning platform via a link. It's all free, and you can download the worksheet there, and that will be where the recording will be later as well. So if you haven't received, don't worry, you haven't missed anything. I will send the link out again afterwards. And in fact, I'll try and find it now. While questions are coming in. Excellent. Glad you scanned the QR codes, Lou. But has anyone got any questions for Becky or Emma while they are here?
There's some in the Q&A box. Shall I jump into a couple of those, Hannah?
Yeah, do. And if there's anything on there that you think, do feel free to read out if anything is quite a kind of common question that other people might find helpful as well.
Yeah. Someone's asked a question about how many years retirement you should plan for, and I love that question because the ONS really recently put out a really interesting piece of research around this, how long we're expected to live for. And I'm 43, and I plugged in my age now and my gender, and it told me that I have a 1 in 4 chance of living until I'm 100. And a 1 in 10 chance of living till I'm 90, which, I mean, they're big numbers. So if you think, you know, traditionally, people might have retired and retirement would have been quite a short period of their life. But now it's quite feasible that our retirement period can be as long as our working life, which is crazy when you think of it like that. So just getting your head around that helps you really think, you know, if I've worked during my working life and received income to fuel that, I need this big pot of money to enable me to have that same income during the period that I'm retired. So not meant to shock you, but I think, you know, it is kind of, well, shock in a good way, because I think we need those kind of figures to go, right, well, you know, if I'm one of those 1 in 10 that is going to live to 100, what does that mean in terms of my pension pot?
Absolutely. And I hope the reason why we included that example towards the end, that actually when someone was 55 with no pension, and usually, I mean, someone mentioned pension age being 67. I think it's going up to 68 soon, and might probably by the time we retire probably go up even higher. And the reality is most of us will need to work until our late 60s anyway. So if you are 49, 50, the chances are you could have almost 20 years. So that almost double the example we've got there. And that's more time for compound interest. And that example also did not include, as you mentioned, Emma, the tax, you know, if you're self-employed, the kind of extra you get on there as well. So that was kind of a worst case scenario. And when we look at the examples of, you know, moderate, kind of basic and comfortable lifestyles or minimum lifestyles, it might be that actually you think, well, I don't need a car, I don't want many things, but actually I do really want a holiday a year. And even if you can boost your pension by like £3,000 a year, that's going to give you a holiday. It's going to give you more money for going out. So it doesn't mean that you have to get an extra £20,000 a year. It might just be a little bump can make the difference between feeling you don't have options in retirement and doing things that make you happy.
I think it's a really good point that it is very subjective, and you know the point around having housing costs, you know, if you're still renting when you enter retirement, that can mean that you need more money because obviously you've got higher costs to deal with as well. But I just want to make a point. I did a podcast last week with the author of the 100-Year Life, who's just published another book on longevity, and he had some interesting points around, you know, maybe we need to rethink the idea of like a solid block of retirement. Maybe we need a more kind of fluid concept of I work for a bit, then I don't work for a bit, then I have another job that is like maybe 2 or 3 days a week and working from home, and just make it a bit less kind of scary that we need, you know, a huge amount to cover 30 years of actual retirement. And maybe think, I mean, obviously it's predicated on being able to carry on working in some form when you get older, but you know, maybe we can think about working for a bit longer or working in a way that works for us as we get older. So you know, we can kind of adapt the amount that we need, and still work and still earn a bit of an income as we get older. Certainly a good thing to aim for anyway.
Definitely. There are lots of really, really good questions coming and very specific ones that I think are really interesting. If we just so everyone knows, if we don't get round to your questions now, what I'm going to do, I will, when I stop this class, I'll get a printout of all of them and I will do a Q&A article, which I will send out to everybody, so that don't worry if your question isn't answered here, because we will record it, I will make a note of it, and we'll get that answered for you and put up. Because I always think if one person asks a question, there are probably 10 or 20 more thinking it and just haven't asked it. So I'm aware that we're not going to get to everyone's questions because there are lots. Just a couple that just maybe quick ones here. So is it possible to backdate tax support for business owners? I know the answer is probably is not going to be a yes, but if you've not made use of it previously, can you backdate tax support?
There's probably a time limit on it that I don't know. Emma, do you know?
I don't know for businesses. No, that would be an accountant question. But with personal contributions, there's an annual limit in terms of how much you can contribute into your pension each year. If you haven't done that for a number of years, you can backdate for the previous 3 years as well. So if you, as a really nice example, say you were to come into an inheritance and wonder what to do with some money, you know, if you've got a chunky amount of money, because your annual limit is £60,000, so you know it's quite a good limit already. But say you had a big amount of money, it might be that you could look to go backwards 3 years and contribute into your pension that way. It's a really nice way to give your pension a really good bump up.
Oh,
I don't know the answer, I'm afraid, in terms of I'd say it'd probably be fairly unlikely when your accounts are fixed.
I do know that, for example, on self-assessment, I think you have 3 years. Like if you have you find you've had expenses you haven't claimed in previous tax years, you have 3 years, and you have to. There's an article on the site where you have to fill in a certain form for that, and it may be that you could do that. But I do know that if it basically it should happen automatically. If you have a pension and you're doing your tax return, the government should be paying in automatically. But we'll look into that more and answer that. There was a question here about can you pay into, so I currently do cover work and earn less than £6,000 a year in the company pension. Can I pay into an old private pension as well?
Yeah, you can do. You can, so you can, if you're earning less than £10,000 a year, which is the trigger for automatic enrolment, you can opt into the employer scheme. You just have to ask to do that. If you have, I mean, ideally you'd want to keep paying into the scheme where you're getting employer contributions, because they're valuable. They're going to pay in a minimum of 3% into your existing workplace scheme.
This person earns less than 6,000, so the company would not be obliged to pay in, would they?
Okay, all right, fine. So in that case, you could just pay into an old scheme if you wanted. Yeah. I mean, it's more important to be paying in and contributing, you know, even if you don't have the employer contributions, because you'll still get the tax relief.
There's a really good question here about inflation. Very quickly, how do we calculate for inflation? I.e., if I want a moderate retirement and need 30k a year, how much will the 30k need to be when I retire?
Oh, no, we don't know the answer to that question because we don't know what inflation is going to be, but we do have a great calculator on PensionBee, which is called the inflation calculator, and you can input an assumed amount of inflation that sounds reasonable, so maybe 2 or 3%, and that will tell you how much you know, you're going to need to put in to cover that amount of inflation. So it's quite useful because all of these quotes and standards are in today's money. So it's not what you're aiming for them to be in 30 years' time. It's what you're aiming for them to be now. And then you would hope that in 30 years' time, they would have grown by more than inflation to keep up, basically, by being invested in a pension.
Thank you. So someone asks, I have found an old pension sitting dormant, but obviously ABNPs are being taken out. What can I do about it?
So it may be possible to move that to a new scheme. It would depend on the terms of that pension. And you know, there are exit fees, there are MVRs, there are things on old policies that make it harder for people. But if you know if it's lying dormant, I think you mean that you can still access it, but you just don't know what to do with it. You can contact a new provider and see if they could move it across for you. You may need to hire an independent financial advisor if it's an old scheme with certain benefits and it's worth more than £30,000. You wouldn't be able to move it legally without financial advice.
Someone just Chris asks, I missed your point regarding rental property 12k. That was just, we were talking about how you plug the gap between what you desire for your pension, living with pension, retirement lifestyle, and the state pension. And as an example, so perhaps you own a rental property and that after tax and expenses, that makes you £12,000 a year, like £1,000 a month. And that can come off the gap that you need to fill between the retirement you want and the state pension. And Helen asks, is there a way of working out how much your pension pot will reduce by year on year when you start to take drawdown in order to see how long the pot will last? I've got a feeling there's a calculator for this.
There is a calculator for it. There is one that's not actually on PensionBee as well. There's a really good spreadsheet. I'll have to share the link, Hannah. I don't know if I can share the link after this because it would take me a while to find it.
Yeah,
But
send it to me. So to
okay,
everyone, I will send you everyone who's watching this, an email out with all the links in the world you could possibly want, and I will include that link in it.
great, thank you. You can change the drawdown amount. You can change the number of years you want it to last for, and it just gives you an idea of how long it's going to last given certain variables. Because yeah, it is very difficult to know, isn't it? None of us know how long we're going to live for, and you know what investment growth is going to be as well. Because that, you know, if you have high investment growth for 10 to 20 years, you could take more out potentially earlier on in your retirement, but you don't know that. So it's good to play around and see the difference that even 1% investment growth would make to your ability to make a pot last to age 90 or 95, for instance.
And I know you've got 2 more minutes. There's a question here about, there seem to be a lot of providers now, which can be overwhelming. What makes PensionBee stand out for the others? That sounds like a question tailor-made for you, Becky.
Oh, here's my sales pitch moment. So it's incredibly easy to use. There are the simple plan choices. So it's not like a self-invested personal pension where you pick from lots of different investment funds and you kind of build your own investment. They're ready-made plans for different life stages, but also different values. So we have fossil fuel free, we have a positive impact pension, and when you come to want to access the money, drawdown is very easy. Withdrawals are now possible via the app. So it's really being able to access your pension information whenever you want on your phone, which I think is great. And if you're self-employed, you can make flexible contributions in, so you don't have to pay a certain amount in monthly.
Thank
I'll
you.
jump in
Enough
as a
benefits.
customer.
I don't want to
my
overdo it.
experience as a customer. For me, because I work for myself, I might have some good months, I might have some not as good months. So the flexibility is something that isn't offered by a lot of pension providers. You might have to commit to a monthly set contribution. With other providers, with PensionBee, you know, some months I might not contribute at all. If I have a really good month, I might bump it up. And that for me is invaluable as a self-employed person.
I'm going to say bye and let you carry on.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Emma.
Thank you, Becky.
Bye, Becky.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Are you okay staying a few more minutes, Emma? I know you're not very well.
Yeah.
But we've got some really, I want to try and just get through a few more. And there's a really good one here about morbid question, but what happens if you die before pension age? What happens to any pension pot you have contributed to? Does it form part of your estate?
Okay, so pensions sit outside of your estate, which is another really interesting fact to know when you are kind of financial planning, especially in later life. So if you were to pass away before you're 75, your pension is transferred to your beneficiary tax-free. If you are over 75 years old, your beneficiary would receive, or beneficiaries would receive your pension. It doesn't just die with you. So that money goes somewhere. And I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people have this notion that, oh, if I save into a pension and then I die, it's all just gone. And that I think that mentality comes from state pension thinking. With a private pension, it's not the case at all. So if you are over 75 and pass away, your beneficiaries can benefit from your pension, receive an income or a lump sum, but they would pay tax at their own marginal rate on that.
Thank you. There's a question here, which I think is a really good one. Is investing in property a viable alternative? And I just say that this is, I married my husband quite late in life, my second husband, and I had already had a home there, and I moved out of my home and moved in with him, and I rented my home out. And to me, I didn't have a pension when I was younger. And I just thought, that's going to be my pension. And actually, I discovered what Emma was mentioning earlier. By accident, I suddenly thought, well, I really should put some money in a pension, because actually property prices go up and down. What if your tenant doesn't pay the rent? So I started putting money in a pension and accidentally found that it came off my corporation tax. And that's kind of what partly led me to on this webinar today and became passionate about pensions. So, I mean, this is from a non-financial expert point of view. I always think I'd rather have my eggs in a number of boxes if I can, so that ideally, if they all go well, brilliant. But, you know, as we've covered in this class, there are so many tax benefits associated with pensions that I didn't realize that does literally make it a no-brainer. So for me, I like to have like a range of options so that even if one performs poorly, I've got a backup plan. I don't know if there's anything you want to contribute to that answer.
No, what you say is really valid. Diversification, having lots of different products to be able to draw on is obviously hugely beneficial. When it comes to property, you hit the nail on the head. If you're relying on income from your property, that comes in the form of rent. And if your tenant doesn't pay the rent, then that income stops. But more than that, you can only access the value of that house by selling it. So you've either got all the money or you've got nothing. With a pension, you've got that pot of money that you can draw down on, and you can leave the rest invested to grow over time. Sorry, my voice is so croaky. But I think that's the real difference between something like a fixed asset, like a property, where you can only really benefit from your intention for it in terms of the cash by selling it. And that isn't necessarily going to be something you can do at the click of your fingers either. So it's just something to think about. By all means, having an investment property and a pension and an ISA and a lifetime ISA that we haven't even talked about today, you know, all of these different pots are really beneficial. And actually, if you were to consult with a financial advisor, they're really great at putting all of that kind of information into a modeling profile and spit you out some nice scenarios of what might happen. You know, what would happen if I were to sell the house at this point, or what might happen if I chose not to take my pension for 5 years and instead live on my ISA. So all of these things. So it's very much a how long is a piece of string kind of question. It's very unique to your personal situation. But if it's something that you want to explore further, having a chat with a financial advisor might be a really good idea.
Yeah, I definitely second that. I think it's really important. There's always this, you know, things that you're not aware about, and there might be pertinent to you individually tax-wise that aren't covered on this class. So speaking to someone who understands, and also your attitude towards risk as well. Talking about risk, there's a really good question here from Caroline about what protection is available if a pension provider goes under before we retire. And anyone here who's old enough to remember Robert Maxwell and his kind of the whole pension fiasco there. I know people who lost their pensions when that happened. The pensions today are very different to those days. There is an article I wrote, which I will put a link to as well when I send everything out, about the protections that are available. So your money is safe. Even if your pension provider, it's your money, it doesn't belong to the pension provider. But rather than cover it here, I will put a link into the email when I send out afterwards, explaining the protections that exist for whether it's a company pension or you've saved directly yourself.
And I would just add to that, Hannah, that each pension provider will have details on the protection afforded you by using their services on their website. So if that's something that's you know, a blocker to you taking the next step with pensions, just go and have a little route around the website, and you'll find the answers in, you know, hopefully no jargon language to help you get that security that you need to be able to take the next step.
And you'll love this question, Emma. Can I ask what the options for starting a pension for my daughter, who's age 19, a university student and self-employed, part-time she teaches? What a great...
Hannah says, I love this because my children both have pensions. Now, they're actually younger than 19, so started their pensions when they were 8 and 10. And a lot of people go, whoa, kids can have them. Yes, they can. So I talked in my section about how anyone who's not working can contribute up to £3,600 per year into a pension, and that includes children. So if your daughter wants to have a pension, she can set one up. And if she's earning a relatively small amount, it might be that she wants a provider where she's got that flexibility in terms of not having to have a fixed amount of contribution each month. but definitely, you know, the earlier we can get our young people started on this track, the better their outcomes in retirement. And I started mine for my girls because I'm really passionate about the gender pension gap, and that women retire with so much less in their pension than men. So I did my bit for them very early in their lives, in the hope that that compound interest will just work away for the next 50 years, and it should give them a pot of about £100,000 off my £3,000 investment while they were under the age of 10. So
Is that because of compound interest?
Compound interest, yeah, and the value of leaving it in it. I mean, that's an estimate, but if we kind of assume that money will grow at the rate that it has historically, but there is no guarantee that will happen. But just the power of leaving it to grow over a long period of time is huge. So the earlier you can get your daughter started, the better, definitely.
Okay, but I made a note there for that. Also, someone's asked here, which I think is a good, they're all brilliant questions, by the way. I love the questions. If your partner was to pass away, sorry, when you say if your partner were to pass away, does that mean your husband, you have to be nominated even if you're married? I don't think that's the case, is it? If you are married, you don't.
If the question is about beneficiaries, you can nominate anyone to be a beneficiary, even if you are, you know, like if you're married, you might want to nominate your children to receive pension on the event of your passing. So no, you don't have to nominate a spouse. I mean, most spouses will nominate each other to look after each other, and then it might flow down to children after that, but that doesn't have to be the case.
But if your husband has made, do you need to nominate a beneficiary?
Yes, you do.
And so I would imagine if they've not, so they would have nominated someone. Do you need to make sure it is you and have that conversation with them just to check? You know, there are cases, for example, where someone, this is something I had to check with my husband, they are married, they marry again, and they've left the ex-wife on the pension as a nominee. So it is worthwhile having that conversation.
Yeah, really important. That's a really good example of why you need to do it. But yeah, if you don't nominate a beneficiary, it just creates a legal complication at a troubling time of your life anyway. So the easiest thing to do is make it easy for everyone and have your beneficiaries nominated.
Crystal, I'm quickly going back to investing for your children. Crystal asks, is a children's pension a better option than a junior stocks and shares ISA?
Two entirely different products. I can't give advice. I'm not here to give advice. But with a junior stocks and shares ISA, that money is available to the child once they reach 18. You know, I think as parents, if we're thinking about what we want to do for the best for our children, they'll have lots of short-term goals, and making sure that, you know, you are clear on what your goals are for your children. My voice is really growing. But you know, if you want to help them get through university, if you want to help them maybe onto the property ladder, locking money away into a pension isn't going to give them that ability to do some of those short-term things. So if you've got disposable income, you really need to be thinking about what your goals are for that money for your children if you're looking to invest for them. And it might be that a bit of each might work well. But again, I can't give advice on individual circumstances. It very much depends on your family goals and your goals for supporting your children.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just making a note here of the Q&A questions. We're not going to get a chance to go through all of them. I really apologise. There were lots of fantastic comments, lots of people going away and checking their pension pots now, and lots of people saying, and I have to say, you know, that someone saying there that their brother-in-law lost his pension to, you know, with Robert Maxwell. I was really, like, I remember speaking to a financial advisor I was wise enough to speak to a financial advisor in my 20s, not wise enough to do anything about it, and he showed me this compound interest graph. I remember seeing it and thinking, wow, it really makes sense. But it's really hard because, like lots of you probably, you know, after paying my mortgage or my rent and after paying all my expenses, there really wasn't anything left over to consider putting into anything. And you always feel like you've got forever. You always feel like it's a long way off. Well, retirement's really boring. I mean, gosh, you're just old when you retire. And, you know, and you get to, you know, for me, I'm in my early 50s and suddenly it's not that far away. And so learning about pensions, for me, realizing they are safe, realizing how many tax benefits, and then realizing I can be empowered myself rather than rely on what my husband might have saved or what I'm going to get from the state government. I think, you know, I hope that the message has come across here that we all have choices and options, and even if you feel like you've left it, like you really haven't. And there's that sunk cost fallacy, and I know that I can fall for this. Like, I haven't done anything up to now, so I'm not even going to think about it or look at it because I'm going to feel too bad that I haven't done it before now. But even if you're starting now, you, as you know, the example we gave in the class here with that compound interest and the tax benefits, even you put a little away now, even if you get like £1,000 extra when you're retired, that's £1,000 you wouldn't have had otherwise. And most of that would be free money, thanks to investment into compound interest. Is there anything you want to say before we go, Emma?
No, I don't think so. It's been a great class, lots of information. I think my parting words would be that if we can empower ourselves around finances, and particularly this topic, we enable ourselves to do exactly what money is intended for, which is to buy ourselves time. Nobody wants to have to work forever. And if your retirement pot isn't big enough, you're going to have, what's the alternative? You have to continue working, right? Exchanging your time for money. We can use our money early on in our lives to grow so that it's money that provides us that time that we really want, and that time to enjoy ourselves in later life.
Absolutely. And freedom.
Sound like an old person today.
It's also the freedom to the things that we love, you know, and it's not necessarily buying designer handbag. For me, it's eating out with friends. Like, that gives me so much joy, and I want to be able to do that when I'm older, and I want that to be an option for me. And it's all about, that's why we started by thinking about what are the things that are non-negotiable for you? How do you want to spend your retirement, and how don't you want more choice than perhaps you might have otherwise? But thank you so much, Emma and Becky, who's gone. And thank you all of you for joining, and fantastic comments. It's not just old, experienced and wise, Michaela. So that feels like a nice thank you so much. I have made copies of your questions. And like I say, I will, any that we haven't answered, I will get some answers for and put them up on an article on the site and send out to you. I'm going to send you lots of links and with the recording. So I hope, well, I know it was helpful from the comments. Thank you so much for your time today. I know our time is really precious, and I really appreciate you spending a time with us today. And I really hope that you can take some positive action as a result. Don't forget your worksheets. Like I said, I will put the notes into a PDF as well, so don't worry if you've missed a part of it or it didn't make sense. Like, all the notes for the slides will be, and I'll put the slides up as well. So basically, this is your kind of pension like masterclass. Thank you so much. So thank you very much, Emma, and I hope you feel better soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone.